with Lucas, there's like, I don't think all artists necessarily have this, but Lucas has a pretty specific creation story. And it's been talked about in interviews before, but we have to start here. So when you're 10 years old, you are in Disney World on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
Mm-hmm.
Please continue.
And so it's funny. This is a story that is a kind of like natural origin story for my work in many ways, but it's not a story I really told as a part of my work until like 2021.
Oh, wow.
It's like it really had like a long delay in the first part of what I was doing. But yeah, so I was at Disney World with my family in Orlando, where my grandparents were living, and me and my father and my brother were on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and the ride malfunctioned, and so it was supposed to happen that the boat we were in was supposed to come out of the dock, and then the other boat was supposed to come out behind it, but that's not what happened. They kind of released simultaneously, and the boats ran into each other. And when they did, my 10-year-old thumb got caught between the two gigantic objects, and it just took my thumb right off. And so this was, an insane situation. And we kind of like bailed out of the boat and like jumped onto one of those little doorways that have the exit sign in amusement park rides, and ran out into the back of Disney. And ended up at a hospital in Central Florida, and my parents were kind of making phone calls trying to figure out what to do about this thing. Disney was reporting that they had lost the thumb, that there was they did not have it to give back to us, which is maybe believable.
You think they held on to the thumb?
I think they did not want the evidence, is my hard feeling about it, but I have no proof there. Like they reported not having it, so we went from there, and we found out about this surgery that was kind of very new at the time. This was in 1989, where they would take your big toe off of your foot and put it on your hand in place of your missing thumb. And so my parents kind of found out about it. The doctor in Florida was unwilling to do this or try, because it was really brand new. It was like they'd done it like 12 times, And so we kept making phone calls, and actually found a hand surgeon in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina, who had done it once. And said he was willing to try to do it again. And so
what's the time? Like this happens right after?
It's like, I am on a commercial airliner within it happens in the afternoon. I think I spent one night in Florida and then got up very early the next morning and flew to Atlanta and then to North Carolina. And basically went immediately into a set of procedures that presage surgery, and surgery happened that evening.
My God.
So it's really fast. When you have a missing something, they really want to deal with it as fast as possible, because once your body starts healing, it's not as viable. It won't work as well. So anyway, so they came up with this thing, and they and I could kind of feel that this people thought this was a good idea. The adults in the room thought this was a good idea. We should give this a try. But they only gave us 50-50 odds. So we flew back to North Carolina, and I had this 15-hour surgery where they did just that. They took my toe off my right foot and put it on my hand. And then, luckily it stuck. It stayed.
That's good news. Yeah. We can celebrate.
My favorite kind of after moment of this is that, in North Carolina in the 80s, this basically made me like the Bionic Man. This was the craziest thing anyone had ever heard of. And so this is this very 21st century surgery, really medical procedure. And then I'm in the hospital, and a day or two after surgery, as the swelling's starting to go down, a nurse shows up with a Tupperware that's got a leech in it. And every day for a couple of hours, they would come attach this leech to the end of my now new thumb, old toe, because it's still the best way to get blood to go into the capillaries of a appendage your body is trying to accept. you know. So they, after doing this really bizarrely new thing, they did this really old thing.
Wow.
Really in quick succession.
There's even more of a segue now because this is a person who works with really old photographic equipment, the 4x5, as well as all of the digital tools that are available. And so, well, this is Lucas's first show at Ramekin Crucible. Actually, is this your first show?
Yeah, that was the first solo show I ever did.
And I just want to put these images up just to give you a sense of what Lucas is working with and how he works. The kind of brazen Photoshop usage in a way that starts to become its own language. And we'll probably see this image again. Keep notes. But, you know, of course, it's not like you had this story in your head where it's like, well, my body's all stitched up, so I guess I make stitched up photographs. Like,
no, not at all. I really, my experience of it was that I told this story probably the most I'd ever told a story in my life. Like, you know, this was like this huge event, and it kind of really, I don't know. It was just really impactful. Like, it really changed a lot of things about my experience. And so it followed me around. And when I met new people, I would always tell this story. And, you know, it kind of like, when I was growing up, it was like, it was almost like there was like a minor fame attached to it. Like, I would go to parties at like other high schools, and kids would be like, "Hey, are you that kid?" You know, it was like there was like a myth around it a little bit. But then it wasn't until I was in New York, and I had already been making this work for a couple of years, and this work had kind of gotten known already, that I was at a party, and I was telling a new friend who knew my work, but didn't know me that well, and didn't know this story. And I kind of told the story in capsule and said, yeah, you know, like the first bad Photoshop. And it's like my brain was like, whoa. And it felt like I had no idea. The questions I thought I was asking in this work had absolutely nothing to do with that. But when the two things got close to each other, I sort of realized, on a real kind of deep nervous level, that maybe this thing was still something I was kind of working out.
So what were the questions that you thought you were asking in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, when I thought about my work, up until that point, I guess, and like, I mean, for a long time afterwards as well, like, I mean, I feel like this is a kind of origin story, but it's not the origin story. Like, right. You know, work starts always from a lot of different places, and mine is no different in that way. It's just like there's something very psychiatrist couch about this, like, you know, like childhood events that structures the rest of my life. It's like an Edgar Allan Poe story or something. But it's at least it's happy. Like, yeah, you have a career. True. It's not some sad story. I haven't been like bricked into a wall. But yeah, so I thought I went to school at Bard College as an undergraduate, which is where I kind of discovered photography. So before, I grew up in North Carolina, as I said, and when I was there was really no art around me. Like, there was my family wasn't art inclined, and there wasn't really an art culture of any kind. So like, I was really into movies and books and music. Yeah, you said that available CD covers were like kind of your first way of looking at art. Totally. I mean, those were the first, like going to, I mean, I remember going to the mall and like taking my like whatever $15 or you know, and having enough money for a new record, and sometimes not knowing what I wanted, and just like looking, you know, through CD racks, trying to like understand what might be in there based on the images. Do you remember, like, are there any album covers that kind of changed your life? Oh my God, that's a great question. I'm sure there are. But I'll give you one, yeah, just to see if it starts to warm the brain. I remember Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. Yeah. Sure. That cover, I was like, what the fuck is this? Totally. It was just so sparse that and it didn't feel like, because the first album I ever purchased was a TLC album, and then
For Christmas, a friend of mine gave me a Mariah Carey album. And then, okay, I'm going to preface this because I've gotten a lot of shit for this before, but I grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore, which means I'm surrounded by preppy white boys. So Dave Matthews Band was huge.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I have a lot of those albums as well. Wasn't that into their album art. But I do remember very specific albums that kind of changed the game for me. And like that Wilco one is the first one that comes to mind.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I also have an attachment to that album. I mean, the album story I can remember is the first time I really got in trouble in school is as like a sixth grader. I'd found a way to get a tape copy of Fear of a Black Planet.
Oh shit!
And the lyrics sheet has all of these curse words on it, and I got caught with the lyric sheet and put in like whatever in school suspension. So
that's a step into gifted and talented. They got that all wrong. But then, I mean, so your movement into photography, you studied with Stephen Shore, and I think you talked about his relationship to photography as like a person who was interested in the media as much as he was the culture, and that was your way of kind of understanding it as well. Like, can you elaborate just a little bit on like what it means to have those two in conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So Stephen's way of teaching about, and I now teach in this program at Bard that I studied in. So I really am like newly sort of pulled back into it. But the idea is kind of that Stephen talks about his own work as like being a photographer is simultaneously being able to go out and explore the culture while also exploring the kind of formal capacities of the medium. So you can look at the world and also kind of give yourself pictorial problems to figure out while you're doing so, and I don't know how much he articulated that while I was learning from him, but I know that encapsulation of it made a lot of sense to me later. And I think that when Stephen Shore was doing that in the 1970s, which is the work I think he's most known for, he's shooting with a large format 8x10 camera and traveling around the US and making photographs of gas stations and intersections and things like this, kind of like trying to get this kind of mundane American experience to speak. And I think for me, by the time I really kind of like grabbed what he was saying was already this moment where photography was really changing and the digital was really coming into play. And so I started to think about like, okay, so if that's what it meant for Stephen to explore the medium was to like, sort of like formally articulate an intersection or whatever, like how do I also kind of contend with the fact that Photoshop is kind of lurking there in the shadows, and so that was my take. I was like, okay, well, yeah, I also want to explore the world while exploring the medium, but the medium is kind of changing. So I kind of felt like I needed to come up with a new set of games to play against this new tool I felt like I was using.
Did you have peers around you that were kind of on the same level that were like, yeah, why would we do it this way? Let's fuck it up this way.
I mean, it was a kind of amazing moment in photography, but most people were kind of most of the work I was interested in at least was going the other direction. Like people were going into a much more analog position and making work that sort of like thought about photography more as almost like object making. People were doing all sorts of kind of concrete photography stuff, things that were really darkroom oriented. Like I feel like there was this feeling before then that if you're a photographer, you're an image maker, and you might want to make a kind of beautiful print, but the print in some ways was kind of secondary to what you were doing as an artist. Like it was a means of getting it out, and it was a pretty neutral decision to make a photographic print. And I think digital, because all of a sudden you can make a photograph and share it without ever making an object, really kind of changed that. And so then artists were like, oh, well, why do we make objects? And so people really leaned into this kind of objecthood side of things. And I think for me, I really loved a lot of that work, but I was really interested in picture making still. And so I was kind of I don't know, I was navigating, uh, through the mirror image of, I feel like a lot of what I was seeing or what I was attracted to.
But it's not that you're, it is like, it's interesting that you say picture making, because it's not that you're interested in narrative necessarily. Like they're really just like strange pictures. Like they're hard to make sense of. They look really relatable and like normal, and then you're like, but none of that makes sense. And it's like a weird, I mean, if you were on the couch, I would think about that moment of like this kind of, yeah, just like an induced moment of trauma that sort of breaks narrative completely.
Totally. I mean, I do think that, like, I mean, I think it's interesting. So in 2021, I made this show called Florida 1989, which really did try to sort of, at least in the text around the show, try to plumb the depths of this idea. And, you know, there is this idea that, you know, it is just bad Photoshop. So I'm using parts of things that are not the right parts to make things whole, you know? But there's also all these other layers in which the fact that this happened at Disney and that, you know, that Disney is Disney and it kind of promotes what it promotes,
Right.
and the way that this kind of like super innocent, super kind of like imagistic place, you know, that creates this sort of world that in some ways is like has no violence and no death, kind of intersects with my body, which is going through something really traumatic. There is a really kind of like all these themes I feel like show up again. And I agree with you that like a lot of it is about like object relationships. Like it's really about like less about narrative or storytelling than it is about something much more primary. Just like it's about my body trying to relate to another body,
Right.
And doing it through this kind of the narrowness of the camera, you know, and still trying to kind of pull that other body sort of through and over to me.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures are really visceral. I think this is a good example of like something that puts you in your body very specifically, because as soon as you see an overgrown image of a tongue in a place where it's not really supposed to be, you have all these immediate sensations. And I think there's like a way that you think about a picture where it is about inducing a level of sensation. It's almost like in the realm of Francis Bacon, where it's like you're opening valves of sensation to like make something realer than a picture happen.
Yeah, I mean, I really do want you to feel the pictures. Like, I mean, I love photography, and I've stayed working within it because I really am interested in it, both as a cultural form and as an art form. But I have a desire, like in the pictures, for a kind of amplification that is not optical. Like photography often kind of presents a world that's there, and I'm really interested in trying to get photography, which is really ill-suited to do this, but to get you to think about the pictures with your body. Like I want you to think about it with you know, whether that's, you know, smell or touch or whatever, like to think about it in some way that's not just visual.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think also I see as much as it is in the body, even the way that you use language, it feels very bodily, or it's like they're words that you like the way they feel in your mouth in a way. Like a title of a show is Ketchup as a Vegetable. That's a nice phrase to say. Like I don't have anything that I can say about it. Like there's something dumb about it, and I like the dumbness of it. And it feels appropriate, but it's like something you kind of turn around in your mouth, and it feels bodily. And there's like a syntax to the pictures where it's like related to language, but you're not going to read it that way. It's not going to be like perfectly legible. Everything is about like, there's a relation, but it's not a perfectly clear one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in things that, like, I don't know, I did this talk a couple of weeks ago about Robert Gober, who I really love.
Nice.
And I was talking about his, like, it was about these curatorial projects he's done over the years, where he's included other people's artwork, but also all sorts of just cultural artifacts of different kinds. And I was talking about how he really seems very interested in objects that are and are also, they are both, they are what they are, but they are also something else. They're, maybe sort of sitting in some sort of symbol system that allows them to be something else, or they are just kind of stuck between two states. And I think I'm really attracted to that quality in language, and I'm also really attracted to that quality in objects. And I think it's something I'm really trying to bring forward in the pictures, is that they act like photographs, so you look through them out into the world, which is, I think, is how we look at photographs, but you also look at them some other way. There's like a delay stuck in there. Like the world they look out into doesn't quite make sense. And I think that for me, that like parallax, that both and, is really been a lot of what I've been chasing in making pictures over the years.
This just occurred to me. Do you watch the cartoon Gumball, The Amazing Adventures of Gumball, by any chance?
No, but I might should.
You should, yeah. I want to interview the person who like does that show too, because it's just, I've never seen so many different like worlds of animation collide, where it's like you can have live action, you can have like a hand that's like painted talking with 3D animation, with 2D animation, with different kinds of 2D animation. Like all of that sounds really bad. Like I know when I explain that, you would be like, that's a bad show. But it's not a bad show. It's a good one. And it reminded me, like, it kind of reminds me of this picture and the way that things are floating in space and like give you the sense of a cartoon or something that is in that, like, I don't know. I see this and I think like Popeye and olive oil.
Yeah, sure.
And nevertheless, it's that, but it's also not that. And it's also within the tropes of studio photography. So you have all these things that you know and recognize-ish, and then it kind of like, it's like really fumbly in my head. Like I can hold it, but it kind of feels like I'm not really holding it.
Totally. I mean, I really love the kind of, the stretchiness of the word animation, like there's animation like cartoons, but there's also like animation like Frankenstein, like a coming to life or a being too real in the world. And I feel like I'm really fascinated with both of them. But I actually think that, my pictures don't move and they don't progress and they don't become cartoons. Like they kind of are stuck though between like that desire for them to be pure image and this like relentlessness of these things having bodies, of them being stuck in the world. And I think that for me, that sense like that they might lift off or they might, like have more freedom than that is really interesting. But they don't. They're inevitably at the end still themselves and still photographs. They're not able to transcend the things that say cartoons are able to transcend.
They do transcend something though, because they don't feel inert and they don't feel like an image that you scroll past. It's an image where it's very much a double take and then, however many takes after that. And it feels like this is hard to do well, to use Photoshop as a sloppy tool. It's like when people want to make something look unfinished, but you can't just have it look unfinished. It has to be like finished, unfinished. And there's like a rubric to that you have to figure out for yourself where, Getty Saboni has a show up at Green Naftali right now, which it's how little can you do to make something feel like a world or a finished piece that kind of transcends its parts. And this is a similar thing where it's like it's a question of wholes and parts, and when they come together, does it become like, does the math unmath itself?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I guess like
if I saw this image, I wouldn't think this is an image by you, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if in person it would have felt more. I don't know. But yeah, it's can you say why?
I think it's the first image of yours that I've seen that almost feels like a wall of color. And like really tiptoeing into an abstract image.
Sure.
Without something that gives me like a foothold.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like it's been a really interesting progress making this work over the years, because I think that as an artist, you sort of there are problems that are the world kind of gives you, that there are like problems that you're applying yourself to, and then as you go kind of deeper and deeper into these things, I think you also start to invent problems for yourself, and like those can get really idiosyncratic. And I think that for me, that sense of a foothold was something that I really wanted to stretch through these years, and I kept really trying to put pressure on the pictures to take more heterogeneity, to take weirder things, to kind of go further and further away from photography. And I think in some ways, like I'm really curious how these pictures will feel to me in 10 or 15 years or in 30 years. But I think that right now for me, that balance between the foothold, like an ability to grab what's going on, and its strangeness is actually kind of remains the heart of the work, even if there I can stray from there at times.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the title gives it some strangeness. Dirt, was. I don't have enough time to think about that.
Sure.
But what I can say is that for the person who's making the work, the register of strangeness obviously changes over time. There's something that was like brazen Photoshop misuse is strange in the beginning, and then you do it a bunch, and then it's like, okay, well, I guess that's me now. Like, did you ever have the sense of like feeling too burdened by the signature of that?
I mean, I kept looking for new space in it.
And I think you're still finding it.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong.
No. It's not. It's not like that. I just feel like it's. Yeah. I mean, certainly. I mean, I feel like. I mean, in some ways, I think I am certainly. Like, I have a real sense looking at my own work, like I am its first viewer.
Yeah.
Like much more like than having a special relationship as a maker. Like I really feel like when they end up as prints and are on the wall, I'm looking at them. And I just think like I kept my impatience to push it out into the horizon somewhere probably outpaced almost everybody else's ability to maintain that foothold, Okay. And so I think for me it's been about like finding more patience as an artist to like sort of understand or sit in those relationships and not be so impatient to reinvent the wheel, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about getting really good at something and becoming, like understanding what that craft is and what that means. And then on the absolute flip side of it, I didn't know about this body of work until I read this interview with you, but Magritte's Vache period. So I'm going to share, like, this shit looks AI generated. And from what I understand, this is stuff these are paintings by Magritte that he intentionally tried to make as bad as possible.
That is how I understand it, yes.
They're so bad.
Yeah. So in 1948, Magritte, it's after the Second World War. It's kind of after the moment of surrealism in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden, this Parisian dealer who had really passed him over, because Magritte is Belgian and is living in Brussels, goes to Magritte and offers him a show. And Magritte, still holding a grudge about being passed over in the 1920s, decides to make this guy the worst set of paintings he can figure out how to make. And I think this is just an amazing, I mean, I love these paintings in so many ways, but I also think it's a kind of great prompt, this idea of trying to make the worst of something. Like, sometimes with students, I'll ask them to make the art they least want to make. And it's actually like really, it's incredible how fully formed it is. Like it's like much more articulated than the art they want to make. And I just think these are the best.
Have you ever made an image that you felt like, let me try to push into as bad of an image as I can make?
Yeah. I mean, I have, I feel like it's proved to be too self-conscious a game for me.
Okay.
Like I know the answer kind of, you know, so it's not been as productive. But every once in a while I see an image by somebody else and I'm like, ooh,
Terrible.
I did not push myself there. Like, good job.
Well, that also makes me think of okay, I mean no disrespect to this person. I'm not a fan of the work, but that doesn't mean that he holds a tender place in so many people's lives. You worked for Vik Muniz.
Sure.
For a long time, for 4 years.
Like 4 years, yeah.
And to me, the difference between like, there's a jokiness in both of your work, but like his jokes are really resolved and yours aren't. And so if you don't know who Vik Muniz is, so these are all just like images. This is not the full extent of his work. I'm short shrifting him for sure, but like, maybe you can describe it better. But so for instance, this is, obviously Van Gogh, but it's made out of other materials that then he would photograph, correct?
I mean, the shorthand for Vik's work is that he uses non-art materials to make images you often, especially, or maybe you don't know, like the Mona Lisa here by Warhol, but which is made of peanut butter and jelly. But they are typically images that are from art history in some way or the other.
What did you learn from working with and from for Vik?
A ton in a way. They've been really, Vik and his studio have been wonderful to me and very generous, and
he seems like a very
he's
sweet
he's
guy.
great.
Yeah.
And I think I think the two things I've figured out were he's actually got a show up right now at Sycamore Jenkins in Chelsea. Sycamore Jenkins Malloy. But I think the thing I learned about his work was kind of both, like it was kind of a two-sided coin, right? Like his work is really resolved, but it wasn't always as resolved as it got.
Okay.
I think that his early work, if you go back, he's got a very extensive website. You can go back and look at some of the early projects, and they have a kind of sly trickiness to them that I think eventually becomes like a house style.
Right.
And I think when it becomes a house style, as all house styles, I love the painter Philip Guston, and he sort of disparagingly said of Barnett Newman at some point that he was painting sublimity by the foot, which I think is a great line. And I do think that like any of these artists who just end up in a lane and stay there are bound to kind of repeat themselves and tire us out in some way. But I think that early on, his work, like his best work, my favorite work of his is work that is where the labor is not really fetishized, where the thing is kind of like is a kind of both and. It right. is like he made these early works that are drawing, like they're three-dimensional sculptures made of wire that look like pencil drawings. And they really do look like pencil drawings. Like when you look at them, they kind of disappear on you. And I think that's something that quit happening in the later work. Like the collage aspect or the whatever the material was. I mean, he made everything from chocolate syrup and diamonds and trash and whatever, like all sorts of things. I think it doesn't hold the same kind of like freshness.
Yeah.
And I realized that I think the thing I took away from it was that sometimes less labor was better. That there was like a sweet spot that a photograph could very easily be overworked, and that photography only really wanted to hold on to these kind of things that felt nearly accidental. And so I really found myself kind of wanting to stay in this space of accident, which felt so deeply related to what the media was.
It also, I know that you've been very influenced by Bertolt Brecht, and thinking about how labor can show itself so that the viewer doesn't get the comfort of, falling into the image, but also understanding its machinations is something to kind of keep the viewer on its toes and sort of keep a critical eye available.
Yeah, totally. And I did want, something that I also wanted that I don't think Vik's work often does is I did want discomfort. Like, I did want them to still feel like unsolved and weird and sort of not, I wanted to frustrate digestion. and I feel like that's, I don't know, that's a mixed bag, because when you frustrate those kinds of things, you really do frustrate them.
Yeah.
But it felt important to me. I felt like I was trying to make pictures of the world that were that I am discomforted. There should be discomforture. Like you shouldn't. The pieces shouldn't all stick together. And so I really wanted something that stayed alive, I guess, in that way. Like that was important.
It does toe the line really nicely though, because there's an attraction repulsion. It's right enough that you want to understand what you're looking at, and it's wrong enough that you want to understand what you're looking at.
Totally. That's really nice of you to say.
This actually, I want to just read the press release of this show because it's very short, and I normally really hate press releases. I think they're usually awful, and I have a feeling that you wrote this.
A person very close to me wrote.
Okay, this is a good press release. So if you want to know what a good press release is, Gallery Ava Preisenhuber is pleased to present Potemkin Village, the gallery's third exhibition with the New York-based American artist Lucas Blalock. In 1787, when Empress Catherine II of Russia made a visit to the recently annexed Crimean Peninsula, Grigory Potemkin, the region's governor and Catherine's former lover, had to scramble to make the territory, whose acquisition had cost the empire much in blood and treasure, look impressive. This was no mean feat, as the conquest had left the region in shambles. So, as legend has it, and it does seem that it is mostly legend, the enterprising Potemkin came up with an ingenious plan. As Catherine and her entourage wended their way across the region, he arranged for ersatz villages to be hastily constructed along the banks of the Dnipro River, which he stocked with seemingly prosperous villagers who had been imported from the surrounding areas. And after Catherine had surveyed her spoils and moved onwards, Potemkin supposedly ordered these villages to be deconstructed and moved further down the river, where she would hopefully be deceived by them yet again. Potemkin's villages, whether apocryphal or not, have lived on in our historical imagination as examples of the desperate lengths that we, as a society, as individuals, will go in order to save face. No one wants to be found wanting. What harm is a little smoke and mirrors now and then? It's a great press release because it really does set up so many ideas, and it doesn't do it in a way that feels, well, for one, interchangeable. Like, this is for this show. There's so many shows, especially painting shows, I will say, where you could do it for so many different artists. Like, it's the same thing. It's nice when there's a texture that feels available to like open up a body of work that's not explaining it away, not giving you diagrams to like solve something, but really giving you something that gives it a new kind of tooth. And like these images in particular, a lot of them are images on top of images. So there's this palimpsest quality. There's this sense of something in front of something else that reminds you of that village that's just been hastily put up. And it gives you a new way of looking at it, where it's like, well, okay, this isn't hasty. but what's being hid, and what does that do to my suspicion of the image? How do I understand this image in a way that I acknowledge the pleasure I feel and the suspicion that it's granting me?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this project was wild. So this is a show I did in 23, I guess. And what it is these are the front image there is a dye sublimation print, which is an aluminum photograph. So you can print directly, not even onto, it's almost like more like into aluminum at this point, which makes this really durable photographic print, which is kind of new to photography in a lot of ways. And that print has been adhered or glued to the glass of a big photograph that's behind it, that's in a frame. So the rear works are earlier works that had come back to me in some way or the other. And the front images are new images that have been glued on top of the glass in front of the image. So the back image is actually still perfectly intact. But now it's kind of like, I think about them as like when you have like all of a sudden have a younger sibling and you have to share your room, like these earlier things were being kind of pushed back into the process. And I mean, I felt like I was kind of like playing at some of the sort of, I don't know, pomp and circumstance of being a mid-career artist and being asked to save all of this stuff and whatever. And like, just what if you needed to put them back in circulation? And so I don't know. Yeah, this show had a lot of feelings around it.
I think these images are awesome.
Oh, thanks so much.
They're so weird. They're really, really weird. And there's something, I don't know, they just hit a lot of things. Like it's hard for me to kind of sum them up. It feels like the result of a lot of lessons that you learned over many shows.
Yeah, I mean, it was really like, I think that like I kind of love thinking an exhibition, like I really like shows. Like it's fun to think about like what set of gestures might go together and how that might work. And it's kind of rare for me to do a show that's really kind of all variations on one gesture. But this show really made sense to me that way. And I was thrilled to get to put it up.
I think for me, when I think of exhibitions, I think of them like albums.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's artists that are good at the Spotify version of it.
Sure.
Where they're like, we need 40 hits.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's artists that think of the album as like it's an experience, and it requires all these different things, and that means that there's ups and downs and slow and fast and all that. Like, do you think of that with the experience of a photography exhibition?
Yeah, I think that like I'm always, whether I'm making a book or making a show, like that sense of like the difference or distance between them is, I feel like a lot of what I find myself chasing. I finally went to the Duchamp show yesterday, which was great. I'm a super fan. But I felt like I was reminded again how much that work is about the combinatorial world of that work. It's like each gesture is kind of interesting, but they're definitely more interesting all together.
For sure.
And it's, I think that's something that really attracted me to art, and that continues to attract me in people's practices. Like there are definitely like artists who make great things where I don't really like their work. Like I can like the artwork, I can like
Right.
the one thing and not love the bigger thing.
Right.
And I can also love someone's whole thing and not necessarily love all the things they make.
Yeah.
And I think that the second one is what I want. I'm more interested in the bigger system than in the individual work, I think.
Right. Yeah. It allows you to take some big swings in the midst of that system, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't.
Totally.
I feel like the way that you talked about photography and like your relationship to it, you also have a sense that the history of photography, or the history of like the medium itself has really oriented you and like been a way to think about picture making. Like you grow up with like understanding 60s and 70s imagery, and then kind of turning and going back into the 19th century and trying to understand more deeply, like what is actually happening when the camera is invented, and what does that mean for our relationship to the body. I don't think this ever came up, but like one of my favorite art history books was Jonathan Crary's Techniques of the Observer.
Oh, yeah.
And like, if you haven't read this book or if you haven't heard of it, it's really good. Like, it's academic, but it's academic in the ways that it should be, where it's like actually just scholarship. And it's not trying to exclude you from a conversation as much as it is just trying to do good work. And there's a lot of art history books that don't do that. But it really marks this territory of like, what's happening to the body in the 19th century? What's happening to the observer in that moment? And I don't know, there was a part of me that felt like this must have been a book for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was definitely a book for me. Yeah, I mean, I think that like, I don't know, there's another book actually by this guy, Martin J. Called Downcast Eyes, which basically starts with this enlightenment idea of like the seer on the hill, right? Like this clear vision, like this imaginary person who is just has a great view on all of the knowledge of the world, and so therefore is its possessor in a lot of ways, and there's a real ownership thing to the Enlightenment, and I think that like the book basically goes through French philosophy, French thought, and shows just like writer after writer the ways in which that vision gets more and more delimited, until you're just down basically in the muck by the end of the 20th century. And it's a great book, but it's like yes, like thinking about those models, like the way that like what Crary does in that book was really super important to me. And I think that using photography feels like it comes with a lot of baggage, right? Like photography is doing what photography is doing no matter what I'm doing. And so I kind of have to go meet it. Like it's like, I mean, I've talked about it before, like it's kind of like writing poetry in English. Like English is an everyday, constantly used language. And so if you want to do something, if you want to make a special case for English, make it do something weird, it needs to have a real connection to the way that English is being used. Right. And so I think that for me, working in photography, which has moved at a clip I never could have imagined over the last 20 years, I've definitely been kind of like surfing on this relationship and trying to look for models in the earlier history of the medium to kind of help me make arguments for what I might be doing now.
What's propelling you in this particular moment? Because there is, as we've grown up, it's like the flood of images only gets more intense. And now, actually, this wasn't even an image that I was fooled by. I was just fooled by a dumb story that I was like, oh, that must be real. Where I thought Scottie Pippen was in a lawsuit that he wasn't in. But all to say that like the place or the territory of truth, or the territory of like what we think about an image is shifting under our feet right now. Like, how are you thinking about sabotaging that or like working with that?
I mean, it keeps changing. I did a show 2 years ago called AI Stole My Lunchbox, which I felt like was like I really felt for a minute like, this thing's in my way. Like I wasn't very happy that so many of the things that I felt like were sort of options or opportunities for me felt like they were kind of all of a sudden, they would go from being like evidently my hand to just being the awkwardness of this kind of computer image. Like that felt frustrating to me when I first started to think about and deal with AI. But I think pretty quickly I moved on to thinking about something that I think has been kind of like recursive throughout my time making pictures is that I think that the problem of making copies of the world and making pictures and doing mimetic things and sort of representing the world through images is actually a really old problem, you know? And it's like the conditions of it keep changing in ways, but when a picture really does some work on you, it does some work on you.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's like, in some ways, I think that the technological condition can be a bit of a distraction for me. And I think that really I'm trying to make something that's just got more energy than it should have. And if I can make those things, then how they relate to those other things, I think will be determined by that kind of triangulation. Like I always think about photography as being like, so I'm trying to make a picture of a thing that I'm actually trying to tell you about. And so it's kind of like me trying to communicate with you through this object that's sitting over there on the table and through this medium that you have a real deep relationship to already, but that leaves me very few real opportunities to get in its way. You know, like I can only do so much before I break this triangle. You know, like I'm asking you to relate to me through
this thing,
and I'm using photography, and I'm counting on your knowledge of photography for this whole thing, for this circuit to happen. Right. And so I think that's really still what I'm doing is just working that circuit. And there are times when I'm more in that groove and less in that groove, but I think in some ways, like I think it's a really old groove.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think whatever images are the result of a particular moment in a society, like we start to understand that as a form. And then it feels like you've been responding to those forms as time goes on. And so right now it's maybe like a weird, like squishy in between period of like, all right, what's the next? Are we in a new space? Are we not in a new space? I think we're still trying to figure it out because it's, you know, for instance, like when those early kind of Google AI videos would come out, like Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it was just like this mangling of so many different things all together. That still doesn't feel like it's available. Like it's kind of uncanny valley territory and it's not that interesting. But I think there's going to be a moment when like, all right, there's the TV dinner version of it. It's like packaged and clean and it makes sense to people and it's familiar enough that you can start fucking with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I don't know. I really like this reading of so P.T. Barnum, you know, of 19th century infamy and fame, had this museum in New York called the American Museum, which was basically like somewhat like a Ripley's Believe It or Not situation. You know, you would kind of come encounter these things, you didn't really know what to think about them, and there were these exhibits and you know, sideshows and all this kind of energy around this place. And I read about him once that one of the reasons he was like kind of New York's most popular entertainer, like he was maybe the most famous person in America at one point in time. And that the reason that this really worked for people so much is that it was this moment in the 19th century where the Industrial Revolution was really happening in the US. And so all of a sudden people were, for kind of the first time in history at this scale, leaving home. So people were going places to take jobs and they were starting their adult lives in places they did not grow up. So they were kind of breaking that kind of family kinship structure that had structured their lives. And so the specter of this moment in the late 19th century was this idea of the confidence man, which was somebody who would take you into their confidence and rob you or rape you or kill you or do something horrible to you. So this idea that this threat was just kind of like pervasive through the society, that this was the anxiety of the moment, and that Barnum had figured out a way to turn it into entertainment, like that this being savvy in that situation was not going to get you killed. And but it still had the buzz in all of the kind of like energy of really participating in the anxiety of your life. And I think that like I felt this in Photoshop at some point. Like I felt like we were slipping from a moment of like, you know, monoculture media where there was a relatively reliable source that was getting us information into a space where that wasn't true. And I don't know how to name the space that is now. But I do think that like art as a reflection of the anxieties that are going on in a bit broader cultural way still makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely feel it in the images.
Yeah, totally.
Give it up for Lucas.